So today, Team 17 decided to drop a massive bombshell of a dev brief that I don't think anyone was really expecting today. Regarding Update 18, what else is coming with the update? In particular, lots of armor changes. Now, for those who don't remember, Update 18 is supposed to be the Stalingrad rework update. Until this moment, essentially today, we did not realize that armor changes were going to be part of the update. Now, as per usual, some of these may not stay the same as I mentioned it. Some of it is subject to change, but it looks like we're getting a lot of cool armor changes. Some good, some maybe bad. We'll have to see when we get there. But starting off, we'll talk about the armor rework as a whole in terms of tank balancing. So the first major element they're going to talk about here, and I'm just going to go down the list, is they're trying to figure out a way to balance the tank combat a little more to enhance immersion, gameplay variety, strategic decision making. And it's going to come with a lot of things, such as unique performance characteristics of each tank, encourage strategic diversity, and highlight faction-based asymmetricness, reflecting the nature of real-world historical warfare, reinforcing the role of tanks as powerful game-changing tools suited for a wide range of battlefield scenarios, and improve the viability of medium and light tanks, which means their relevance in the battles will be more and more prevalent. This also comes with some heavy tank limitations, which we'll get to as we cover this list. So right off the bat, they're already trying to essentially change up some of the actual stats and make it so other tanks are more viable, like lights and mediums, because everyone likes going for heavies. They have the most firepower and most armor at the cost of mobility, where medium tanks are like a perfect balance of firepower and mobility, and then light tanks are, well, fast but lightly armed and armored. So there's a lot with that just by itself, but now we get into the nitty-gritty of those details. Now, what stats will they be changing, at least according to this dev brief? So here we have them. Each tank will now have specific stats assigned to its weapons, including muzzle velocity, shell drop-off distance, reload time, damage output for both armor-piercing and high-explosive shells, turn speed, depression and elevation angles, and the power of its coaxial machine guns. And for what we know about, say, German tanks with their high-velocity main cannons, I'm curious how they're going to balance this out, because by reality, it should have higher velocity. But there are tanks like the IS-1, the Firefly, and the E-76 that will have really good muzzle velocity as well. But also, we're curious what the reload speeds are going to be. So there's a lot of change with this just alone, and we still have more. So there's that, and that's just a little bit of tidbit from me personally. Now, other tank changes. Tank traversal. So main things they're looking for in this subject here includes enhancements to hit detection, impact on objects, and most notably better traversal over trenches, which for any of us who have used recon vehicles like the Puma or Greyhound, they are not good for going over trenches. I don't know if they'll fix anything with that since they're wheeled vehicles, but sometimes with tanks, it's just a pain to go over trenches in tanks and you're always afraid of getting stuck. So that'll hopefully be a good change for the game. Next, we have condition-specific behavior. So another major addition of this update will be the introduction of condition-specific behavior in tanks. Tanks will now respond dynamically to the surface they are driving on, with performance changing depending on the terrain types, such as muddy ground, urban streets, or open fields. Meaning that if you're on roads, you should typically go faster, as there's not as much resistance for the tracks compared to, say, muddy ground, where you're more likely to get stuck. So that'll be cool and actually a more realistic change. So nice to have it. This will really make it to where you want to stick with roads, and if anyone's running anti-tank mines, you're going to maybe have a field day with this one. On top of the changes that tanks will have depending on what terrain they're on, there also comes a new class coming to tank crewmen called the Tinkerer. Now, this is a work in progress, as things are subject to change, especially with this class, but here's what we have so far. This class will allow tank crewmen and just tank crews in general to make adjustments to their tanks so they're not stuck in the same stats when they leave the HQ. And they can make a couple changes as follows. They can apply a mobility upgrade, which essentially allows you to trade armor and protection for speed. So you can shave off things like armor and things like that for less health and less armor. Maybe, say, if you're in a heavy and you do this, maybe a medium can pierce you from the front, but obviously you have a heavy tank gun, so you can one-tap it back. So this one, don't know how far it goes. This is just my speculation, but that's what I at least think of so far, and maybe as a potential example. Turret tuning. So essentially this will allow for the electronics or hydraulic systems to allow for faster turret movement, including rotation speed and damage. By enacting this, you will trade speed for slower reload times and potential jamming, as the increased speed is temporary. Maybe this means that you have higher reload, but you can bring the turn around faster, as the turn traverse for a lot of these tanks is very slow. So there's that. And then armor bracing. Say if you're under heavy fire or you're dealing with a lot of heavies, you can add armor to your tank. Obviously, if you're adding armor, the tank's gonna get heavier, meaning you have a slower top speed and slower turning for better protection. So those are the 3 changes that the Tinkerer can make as of right now. Again, all of it is just for what it can be in the next update. So just keep that in mind. Next, we have the heavy tank limitations. With this, we have a little bit of confusion, so let's talk about it. So rather than balancing all tanks into a uniform meta to match the power of heavy tanks, we are embracing their role as the strongest but rarest and most impactful assets on the battlefield. In Update 18, heavy tanks are going to be intended as a high-impact, game-changing power rather than early-game tools. To achieve this, we'll be increasing the cooldown period for spawning a heavy tank, with the timer now beginning only after the vehicle has been destroyed rather than when it's first deployed. In addition, the number of heavy tanks available in a match will be capped at 2 active units at any given time. We will closely monitor the community feedback after release to determine whether this limit should remain in place or adjusted in future updates. Now, as I understand this then, okay, if you've deployed a heavy tank, say you're the US or the Germans, you deploy a 76 or a Panther, does that mean you can only deploy a 75 or a Tiger? Or just the opposite heavy tank? Or do you have the option to deploy, say, 2 Panthers or 2 76s? And then what about the Russians? They only have 1 heavy tank. So there's a little bit of confusion there. I think they could use a little bit of clarification, but that's just me. Other than that, though, I can see what they're going for. They're trying to limit how many tanks can be spammed on the battlefield, and it makes it to where if you lose a heavy tank, it is a massive blow. Even if you have the fuel to replace it, that means it's not going to come back anytime soon. But that is that. But your guesses for some of this is as good as mine. But we're going to continue moving on. Next, we have the immersion improvements, which is essentially just audio-visual stuff that they're going to be looking into. So nothing too major there, but at least it'll be coming in Update 18. And the last major armor bit, and this actually goes into artillery. That's right, they're bringing self-propelled artillery to the game. Now, with this, what they say here is introducing the self-propelled artillery vehicle. Think of this new vehicle type as artillery on wheels. This is also the first step towards overall artillery rework coming in Hell Let Loose this year, which will allow squads of 2 to take the functionality of artillery and move it around the battlefield relatively freely. My guess is then maybe they're going to probably take artillery out and make it self-propelled. That means that maybe a recon tank can come along and destroy the artillery and make you cost fuel. Meaning that artillery can no longer be heavily spammed, but you can either trade your tank crews, or maybe it's another function where you can just run artillery tanks. I don't know. There's a lot that could be going on with this. So, but that means that's the first step to changing artillery, which I know a lot of people are going to be happy for because the artillery meta in the game is a bit annoying. So now it's going to be made self-propelled, which probably means you got to be in closer range. You can move around, but you're vulnerable. That's the main thing, is you're vulnerable and easier to counter, arguably, in armor or just in general. Just a bunch of changes. So there's that. Now, this last thing I have is the change to support, or the support class. And that is if you throw down your supply box, you can then pick it up. So yes, this is not a tank one, but it's for infantry. But it's still an important change that's going to be coming to the game for those who try to get up garrisons using support players. Meaning that if you miscalculate and you drop your supplies, you can pick them up and put them back to where you need to put them. So there's that. Now, there's a lot here. Please leave your comments, questions, concerns, anything down below. I'll try to get to as many as I can. But there's a lot of change, and I think it could be very good, especially since armor's been very neglected in the updates lately, especially for the last couple of years. So, now, could all this be good? Sure. Could some of it be bad? Sure. But I think when we finally see what happens, we can make our judgments then. But I hope you got something out of this video, and take care. I'll see you in the next one.